Hi everyone, it's me. So today we're going to talk about 11 reasons why I, as a foreigner living here in the UK, will never live in London. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alanna and I am a Canadian, but I have been living in the southeast of England down here in Kent for the last almost 6 years. Now, I know a lot of fellow foreigners, fellow expats, especially younger expats. Everybody is drawn to London. It's the dream to live in London. And I'm here to tell you that it is not for everybody. And it's certainly not for me. So I have 11 reasons why I will never live in London. And without further ado, let's go. So before we get started, I do have more to say. Just a little tidbit, just a little bit of further ado. So London is an incredible city, certainly. And here in the UK, you're kind of either in one of two camps. You either love London or you love to hate London. I'm sure that's happening in the comments currently. But one thing to keep in mind, even though London is a very cool city, it's got its positives, certainly. London does not represent England. London is very much a beast of its own. It's incredibly unique and it does not represent England at all. So just something to keep in mind. It's a great place, really cool city, but England is not like that. The rest of England and the rest of the UK really is not like London. Okay, so now we're gonna get into my list, all right? I've typed them out so I don't forget. One of the reasons that I will never live in London is that the reality of living in London, of the grind of living in London, is not like what you see on TV or on movies. In fact, it is a struggle. You might be commuting 2 hours each way every day to get to work. You work long hours, you have an overpriced lunch, you get home late and you are exhausted. So while watching films and TV shows about London is very cool, it's a lot of fun, it looks really trendy, the reality of living in London is very different. And yeah, it's a struggle. Some people are willing to go through that struggle, to do that grind, if you will, and some people are not. And it's just, life is difficult enough as it is. It's just not for me. Number 2 on my list of why I will never live in London is busy, which obviously it is busy. It's a massive city, but one of the ways that I describe London is overstimulating. It's just busy. There are so many things to look at and to see and to just take in through all of your senses. It's a lot. And for me, it's just a bit too much. Now, I thought some population comparisons might be helpful to you're never fully going to understand it because nobody can comprehend it, but just to kind of give an idea in terms of the sheer size of London and the amount of people, just how busy it truly is. So Toronto's population, I'm from Ontario, Toronto, that's the proper way to say it, by the way. Toronto's population is about 2.7 million people, give or take a couple, all right? The GTA, which is the Greater Toronto Area, so that encompasses quite a wide area around Toronto. That's quite a bit more at 6.4 million. But if we're thinking of the city of Toronto, 2.7 million. Now, London as a city has about 8.9 million. 8.9 million human bodies. And if we want to talk about Greater London, the outside as well, that's around 9.4 million. So if we're just looking at the cities themselves, Toronto's 2.7 million versus London's nearly 9 million population, London is more than 3 whole Torontos. Yes, that's a lot. So when I say London is busy, I mean London is busy. Number 3 on our list of why, as a foreigner, I will never live in London are the tourists. Now, I'm sure it is very cool to live in a place that tourists actually want to visit. That in itself is a really cool concept, but the reality of it is that anytime you are trying to get somewhere, whether that's to work, whether that's to the tube or the train, or you're trying to make a meeting, or you're meeting up with friends, or you're trying to go home, there are always tourists in the way. And one of the things that drives me crazy, and I've been that person, is there will be lots of tourists that will like stand in the middle of the sidewalk and they just stop walking. They just stop. So of course they're like, you know, looking up, they're taking pictures, they're trying to get a nice selfie, and you know, they're living their best life. They're on holiday, they're enjoying themselves, and you are like sweaty and you're running to the station and you're trying to catch your train, and these people are just in your way. And maybe you've had a really terrible day at work, whatever. It's just, there are a lot of tourists, and unfortunately they always get in your way. Hi, it's me, Alanna. I'm just sitting over on this side of the frame. If you are still watching this video, could you please subscribe? Like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that stuff genuinely helps my channel, and I really appreciate it. All right, that's it. Number 4 on my list is, of course, it's expensive. Now, I think most people pretty much understand that London is going to be more expensive, but wow, is it ever? If you are a regular person, to actually purchase property in London is pretty much unattainable unless you've got like a crazy wicked job, and if you do, I'm so proud of you, that's awesome. But for most of us, especially young expats who are coming to the city to experience it, it's expensive, and you likely will need quite a few roommates. Now, of course, people know that London is expensive, and some people are, again, willing to accept that struggle because they want to be in that city, and fair play if that's you. But one of the things that I don't know if people think about is, yeah, it's expensive to live, and it's a struggle, it's a grind, again, but a lot of the time you are left with so little extra money that you can't actually do the things that you want to do in London, which is why you moved there in the first place. You know, it's not uncommon to go to a London bar and pay £12 for a cocktail. Yeah, it's soul crushing, but that's the reality. So yes, it's expensive, cost of living is expensive, rent, all that stuff. But also to keep in mind that because you are left with so little money after all of that important stuff, that you may find you don't have the funds to do the stuff in London that you wanted to do. That's why you moved there in the first place. Just something to keep in mind. Number 5, it is loud, which kind of goes without saying, you know, with nearly 9 million people, it is loud, and it is often loud all day. You know, things are open late, people are out late, people just wandering around. So it's very difficult to find a quiet moment. And that's what I mean when I say that London is very overstimulating. It's loud, it's busy, there's noises, there's people, there's things to look at. There's just like all your senses are kind of overloaded. But certainly it is a loud city. Number 6 on why I will never move to London, air quality. Years ago, when I first moved to England, I went into London. This is a long story, let's cut it short. I was talking to other expats, and they were saying they lived in London. I hadn't, but I was in London for the day. They were saying that they were actually prescribed inhalers because the air quality was so bad and their bodies were literally not used to it from whatever country they came from. So they come to London, their lungs are not having a good time, and they were actually given inhalers from their GP. So yeah, it's a big city. It's got a lot of people in it, a lot of industries, a lot of stuff happening in the air, and the air quality is not so good. Number 7 is crime. Now, I don't really want to get into this because it makes me deeply upset and sad and frustrated and angry. However, crime in London has really been on the news, and perhaps you have seen various stories, and yeah, there's not just one, there's various. Like with any big city, there will be more crime, sure. And it's something that you need to think about and be aware of compared to living in a small village. Of course, small villages are going to have their own type of crime, sure. But crime in London is something that you need to consider and to think about for yourself and make your own choice on whether you're gonna go for it or not. I don't want to say that to like freak people out, like, oh my God, you go to London, that's the end of you. But it is the world that we live in, and it is something that you have to think about. Let's just leave that one where it is and move right along. Number 8 on why I will never live in London: rush hour. Let me explain. Every place has rush hour, certainly, but have you ever been in London during rush hour? It is like something that I have never experienced before. So if you are in London, even as a tourist, anyone watching this video interested in like traveling to London, getting around the city or trying to leave the city during rush hour is insane. The sheer amount of people trying to get home is, again, it's very difficult to comprehend. So rush hour in London is unbelievable. And of course, if you are working in London or you are trying to get home at that time, I mean, you're gonna be crammed into the tube, crammed into train stations and train carriages, standing like sardines pressed up against a whole bunch of other people. And I'm not down for that. I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I said, no thank you. Number 9 is that London can be very lonely. So like with any big city, I think sometimes it can be harder to find a sense of community because of the just sheer amount of people there. And it kind of has this, it's like an opposite effect. You think, well, there's tons of people, you know, that, you know, I've got all these people I can be friends with and spend time with and get to know and whatever. But it's this opposite reality where it's actually very lonely. And I think people are less approachable, they're less friendly, and it can just feel like you are just one floating speck in the 9 million people that share the same home as you. So I do find London, it is much harder to find some sort of sense of community, and it can be very lonely. And I don't think that people really talk about that, because normally the image of London you get online, it's like this really cool, exciting place, and it is in certain ways, but there are also a lot of negatives. Obviously, I've been talking about most of them, and I think being lonely is one of them. Number 11 of why I don't want to go to London is, naturally, guess what? It smells like things that you don't want to smell. As with any big city, cleanliness can be a bit of a struggle, which also means that walking down the street, again, overstimulated, you're looking at everything, you are hearing just crazy amounts of noise, and it smells like things that I don't want to talk about on YouTube. Now, of course, it's not every place in London, of course, but also a little like side tip, a little hot tip for any foreigners watching or people interested in moving up to England or London or whatever. I think it does help to try. You know, you don't know what you want really until you try it. So if you want to try London, you know, and see how it goes. For me personally, I last lived in a really small village. I actually have a video on my YouTube channel from last week. I went back to the village that I used to live in, and having that experience made me realize, wow, I am a small village kind of person. That is what I like, that is what I want. But sometimes you don't know that until you try. So if you want to give London a try, by all means, give it a try. Maybe you want to give a small English countryside village a try. Give that a try. You don't know until you know, obviously. And finally, number 11 of why I won't move to London. This one's kind of like two things. So it is really, really difficult to own a car in London. Now, on one hand, you think, well, it'll be cheaper. You don't have to pay the costs of owning a car maintenance, insurance, buying a car, and all that other stuff. So that's good. But also it means that it can be really difficult to get out of the city. So thankfully trains here in England are wonderful, and you can certainly take the train to a lot of places, but when you are in London, you are likely not going to have a car because owning a car in London is insanity. But it also means that you may have a harder time getting to the places that you want to go to, maybe for like tourism kind of stuff. You know, you want to go see something that can be difficult because you cannot drive there. Unless you meet someone who has a car, in which case befriend them and maybe they will drive you. So that is kind of a positive, especially for young people coming to the city. You do not need a car. Do not buy a car. Don't budget money for a car. You can absolutely get around the city on public transport, which is truly fabulous, but it also means that getting out of the city and seeing other stuff around England or around the UK is more difficult. So those are 11 reasons why I will never live in London as a foreigner. I just do not have any interest in living there. I love visiting London. I love going for the day or for a weekend or what have you, but I will never live there. It is just not my city, but maybe it's yours. So I hope you like this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for all your support here on my channel. Subscribe. Like this video, leave a comment, all that stuff genuinely really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. And thank you. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, bye!